Normally, I don't pick up hitchhikers. By rule, I don't think it's worth the risk when, if someone truly needs a ride, they can call an Uber or Lyft and be off in 10 minutes. However, while on a quick snack run last month, I made the mistake of breaking my rule when I approached a young woman who was walking alone in the pouring rain. At first, I fully intended to drive by as I would have with any other person. She must have noticed me driving up because right as I came up on her, she spun around, nearly jumped in front of my car, and frantically waved her arms for me to stop. As I screeched to a halt, she ran up to my driver's side window and started on a tangent about how her phone died and how she was still 6 miles away from home. Her face was obstructed by a mask, oversized hat, and dark glasses, so I couldn't glean any semblance of sincerity from her facial expressions. But I could hear the desperation in her voice. Dumb of a decision as it was, I didn't feel right letting her walk home in the rain without a phone when she was clearly begging for help. This is on top of the fact that I didn't exactly have anywhere else to be at 1 a.m. I opened the door, and almost as soon as she entered the car, she asked for me to go straight. As I drove, I tried to make conversation with the stranger, but I never could get an actual response. The only reply I'd received was, "I'd like to go home. Please help me get home." Eventually, I just gave up entirely. After around 10 minutes of driving straight, I asked if I was supposed to be turning anywhere, but was met with silence. I turned toward the woman for a brief moment to repeat my question, but instead slammed on the brakes when I laid eyes on her. All the items covering her face had been removed to reveal a completely smooth surface. The only hint at some approximation of a face was the slight rise and fall of veiny skin where her mouth would have been, almost as if she was imitating breathing. Instinctually, I put the car into park and moved to run out, but before I could even touch the handle, a large hand clamped around my arm and held me in place. I was close to having a full-blown panic attack, but she raised a gnarled finger to non-existent lips and made a quiet shh sound. When she spoke, her voice had taken on a much more gravelly tone, and the pressure from her vice grip forced me to take every word with the utmost respect. "You will not leave," she stated. "You must drive. You no longer have a choice." When she released her grip, I didn't say a word. I didn't even want to comment on the apparent bruising on my arm for fear she'd do much worse if I complained. I simply exhaled, put the car into drive, and kept going. We must have driven for another half hour. She'd occasionally tell me to make a turn here or there. Still, after about 15 minutes, I knew we were headed toward the more rural parts of the county, an area where people were known to go missing. With every glance in her direction, I could see her featureless face was trained on me. It was as if she was observing me, not entirely sure of whether or not she could trust I'd take her wherever she wanted to go. And as soon as that trust was broken, it would very quickly be over for me. Eventually, she instructed me to pull up to a lone, run-down house just off the highway. The windows were boarded up, and I could see piles of trash strewn about the exterior. When we stopped in front of it, she told me to get out. An unconscious shake of my head prompted her to slam her giant fist on the dashboard, cracking the plastic. Without argument, I walked out into the cold night. She followed behind and pointed at the house. In silence, we walked into the decaying building and were immediately met with a groan. I shined my phone's flashlight forward and saw what appeared to be a homeless man writhing around on the ground in pain. He was foaming at the mouth, and his eyes were bloodshot. I gasped and took a step back onto some glass which alerted him to our presence. He turned to me and begged for help. He begged for me to call an ambulance or at least take a message for his kids. He began rambling about how he'd made a colossal mistake, and unfortunately, he never got to finish what he was saying. The woman pounced. In the blink of an eye, she was on top of him, her hand contorted into a claw that wrapped entirely around his face. 13 grotesquely long fingers held his head down as he struggled against her ungodly strength. He tried to fight back, but the weak man's struggles were met with even more force. The creature upon him was determined to lap up every last breath, and I swore I could hear a twisted chuckle as it watched him cling to life. The screams seemed like they went on forever, but in reality it was quick. Maybe 30 seconds had passed, and he was gone. When she retracted from the body, a quick shine of my phone's light revealed a broken jaw, a twisted nose, and deep bruising around the neck. The woman faced away from me, and for a moment we both just stood there in that horrible place. I tried to find my voice. I wanted nothing more than the strength to tell her that all I wanted was to go home and pretend like that night was all a nightmare. But I didn't have to. Reminiscent of the way she turned to me on that dark, rainy road, she spun around and revealed not just a large smile, but a brand new face, one that greatly resembled that of the man she had just taken from this world. Her parting words to me in his voice were, "Thank you very much. Never return here." With that, she simply walked further into the decaying structure. As soon as she was out of sight, I sprinted back to my car and sped all the way home. That night, I must have quadruple-checked all the locks, taped the curtains down, and left a pile of makeshift weapons by my bed. Every single dream I had for the next month consisted not just of visions of her, but of many more creatures like her. And honestly, despite it all, I still never wanted to tell anyone. I want nothing less than to be another random guy throwing a story in the sea of tall tales. I knew that anyone I told this to would roll their eyes and tell me that I'm being ridiculous or that I needed to be drug tested. I'd rather just avoid the scrutiny entirely. But just last week, a man was found dead in his home, clearly suffocated, jaw and nose broken. No tips had led to anything significant. The police's only hint is of a crappy video of some young man who was described as appearing featureless being dropped off near the home. Funnily enough, just last night, I saw a post on one of those community apps saying that someone in the area thought they saw the murdered man walking the streets. Turned out to just be a young man who looked remarkably similar to him. After hearing that story, I think I feel a little less crazy going public with this. To the man I enabled the death of, I'm so sorry. I thought I was doing something good, and as a result, it ended in tragedy. I will never forgive myself for that. I don't know what you were going through, but you deserved so much better. And to the world at large, if you're ever in a situation where someone is trying to hitchhike with you, please keep driving. It's called the Knock Knock game. All you need is an empty room to play it. You will knock 2 times. Wait for it and hear a loud knock from the other side. Whatever you do, do not enter the room. The room will be empty, but something will be in there. Is it a demon, the devil himself, or God, an eldritch abomination? No one really knows. Maybe it's better to not know. I remembered playing it as a kid at my friend Thomas's house. Me, him, and Tobias, a fat and kind of slow kid that Thomas used to bully a lot, but still hang around because Tobias's parents were rich, so he had lots of cool games for Nintendo NES and Sega Mega Drive, even the Mega CD, and 32 add-ons. I started to like Tobias more than Thomas. He was always making racist jokes and saying mean things about everybody. But we had agreed to come over to his house to play a game he had learned from a book called the Necronomicon that his dad supposedly had a copy of. This was, of course, not the Necronomicon written in blood and made of human flesh, but a hardback version. Still, it contained things like how to summon demons and how to raise the dead with necromancy. Or it did to Thomas, anyway. He was a bit of a compulsive liar. His parents weren't home, so it was only us 3 boys in the house. We knocked on Thomas's bedroom door and waited for it. "Nothing's happening," Tobias said while munching on a chocolate bar. He really was a sweet tooth and always eating sweets and drinking cans of soda pop. And then, bang! A loud sound from inside of Thomas's room, like someone was really mad and punched the door from the inside. I was scared as fuck, almost pissed my pants. I carefully snuck to the door and peeped through the keyhole. Inside, it was still empty. "I want to go inside." Tobias dropped his chocolate bar on the floor, and me and Thomas had to hold him by his arms so he didn't do anything stupid. "Stop, you stupid pig! You'll get yourself killed!" Thomas shouted at him, a bit loud. Tobias started crying. "I'll go first." Thomas did not seem to care, and knocked 2 times. A knock was heard from the other room. "Are you a man or a woman?" Thomas asked. 2 knocks, signaling no, heard from the other side. "Are you a demon or an angel?" I asked it. 2 knocks. No again. "Is it safe if we come inside?" Thomas asked. 2 loud, banging sounds. No again, but it seemed angry this time. "Maybe we should stop," I suggested. "No, keep going, you pussy," Thomas commanded. Tobias was still crying. He seemed to get more and more afraid. I couldn't blame him, really. "Are you getting mad?" I asked it. 1 loud bang. It was getting real mad. "Are my parents alive?" Thomas asked it. "Ha ha ha!" Evil laughter from the other side, followed by 2 knocks. Tobias knocked and asked, "Can you speak?" "Yes," it answered in a voice so creepy both me and Thomas fell to the floor. We were frozen with fear, but Tobias wasn't. He knocked again. "Do you have candy?" he asked naively. "Yes, child, come inside." I was trying to speak, but I couldn't get a word out. In what seemed like slow-mo, I could see Tobias turning the door handle, ready to go inside. I was ready to go up and stop him, but Thomas held me down. Tobias went inside the empty room, and the door slammed shut. I rushed up, but Thomas held me back. "Don't be stupid. He's gone, but you're still here. No one can enter the room for another 24 hours. It got my parents and him. It'll be satisfied." I peeked through the peephole, and the room was empty. I called Tobias's name, but no answer. Thomas knocked and asked if it enjoyed the fat boy as a sacrifice. "Yes," the voice answered creepily. I just looked my former friend in the eye and left the house of evil to never return. This was years ago. I'm now grown up and moved to another city, living in a small 1-bedroom apartment. I decided to summon the thing again. I knocked on the door to the bathroom. That's the only room where it could appear. I had bottles ready to piss in for 24 hours, and I would make sure no one would enter the bathroom. I knocked on the bathroom door 2 times, and it knocked back to signal its presence. But the knock was not from the bathroom. It was coming from the front door to my apartment. I looked out, and no one was there.